Hi, can you hear me all right?
Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me all right?
I can't hear you. Can you hear me? No, I can't seem to hear you. Let me see if I need to adjust anything on my side. Looks like mine is turned up as far as it needs to go. Let me look again. Yeah, mine's like at 67, so that's
Hmm.
good volume.
You still can't hear me though? Still can't hear
Yeah, I
me
just
though?
can't hear you at all. Sometimes it's a headset if it doesn't connect good.
What about now?
No.
Hmm.
Can you talk without the headset?
Let's see.
Let's see if
Can you
that'll.
hear me?
No. Um, I'm not hearing you at all. I don't know.
That's
Yeah, it is odd. I don't know what happened because I was just on my computer in a meeting and I could hear those folks, they could hear me. So I don't know what's going on with our connection. I guess we'll see when other people come in, huh? See what's going on. Um, but if you can hear me, I guess other people can hear me too. So hopefully,
Yeah.
uh, let's see. No, that's nothing there. Let's see what Dr. Hardy, maybe she can hear you. She looks like she's coming in. Good evening, Dr. Hardy.
Dr. Hardy.
We're trying to
oh,
get sound together because I can't hear Savannah
can you hear me?
and
I
I
can hear
can't hear
you.
you either.
Can you hear
Okay,
me?
that's not good. You can
Okay.
hear me, but
I
I
can
can't
hear
hear
you,
you.
Savannah,
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
and I can hear
I don't know what I
Latasha.
need to do. What do I need to do? I was just on here and I could hear
What's
the
your
people that are
output?
on here.
I'm yelling, but she can't hear me, so it's not gonna work.
Maybe I'll change what the speaker? I don't know. Okay, you guys talk. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
yay. Yay, good.
Oh, okay,
There
great. I was like, check your
you go.
audio.
I changed the audio, yeah.
Yeah,
With
that's
the
what
speaker. The
sometimes
speaker.
it'll do that.
Okay. Okay.
Weirdness.
Well, we're in business then.
The joy of
Yay.
Zoom.
Yeah,
Oh.
'cause- okay.
Thanks for doing this for us, newly minted Dr. Rowley.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
thank
excited.
you.
It made me have to think back. What in the world did I do all these 7 years?
It's a blur now.
And I apologize. I got a cough or cold or something. I don't know. So hopefully, I'll mute if I'm coughing so that it doesn't bother you.
Understood. Hey, Dom, how are you?
Hello. Hi. Oh, and I did get an email from Katie, Dr. Hardy. She said she's going to
Okay.
be like a few minutes late, but she'll still be
Okay.
here.
All right. Sounds good. Hey, Dana, you doing all right?
I am doing it right. I'm in the thick of dissertation and then some other wrenches that came up. But yeah, so I'm like, this is 30 minutes, right? Is that 30 minutes?
It's an
Thir-
hour, but
But
it can
Oh, it's
be
an hour.
it can be
yeah,
what you need it to be
Okay.
today.
yeah, we won't hold you hostage. Like,
Okay.
Right, exactly.
I could just throw out my main questions, which you might not even have the answer to. But as far as a dissertation, I feel I might gain something, but I'm on the defense.
Right. Yes. No, I get it.
That's what
Yeah,
I've been doing.
definitely
That's what I
get it.
do all the time.
I told somebody that after I defended my dissertation, my friend said for like a month or two afterwards, everything that they said to me was like an argument. Like I had to defend it all. I had to, I had to defend everything I said. So I was, yeah, when you're in that mindset, you're in the thick of it, you're just like, hey, if I gotta argue for it, I will do it. So,
Oh, well, I feel like I'm always arguing things.
yeah.
So,
Definitely.
yeah, actually, are we waiting on people? I could
Yeah,
ask.
I
we're
was
giving
thinking
folks
we
a
give
few
it like
minutes.
maybe a couple more minutes.
Oh,
Yeah, because there
well,
were still some people that might be
maybe I'll ask this question now if it's okay, because it's kind of specific. I don't know if you know, and sometimes nobody seems to know. They found after I started taking dissertation credits, and I'm like planning on finishing like within a couple months all my writing, that I actually need 9 more credits because I had transfer credits that were inappropriately applied. So yeah, so I'm taking 9 summer sessions, right? Nine credits in the summer. So that'll put my last 9 credits for dissertation instead of the summer into the fall. But I plan on being
Okay.
done writing by the spring.
Mm-hmm.
So, how's that going to affect? Will I be able to defend in the spring or at the latest August, even though those credits will technically be continuing on until
If you
December?
if you have 90 credits, you should be able to technically defend. It's gonna depend on what your committee is saying to you. Though, yeah. So
So if
I
you,
would have
do you have to have completed them all, or could you be in the middle of those last 9 is really the question.
you could probably be in the middle of the last 9 if they if with good faith they feel like you're gonna finish it.
Oh yeah, well, if it's finished, it's finished. So
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
hope, but I'm
Yeah,
expecting at a point.
because even after you like turn in your dissertation, and have your defense, there'll still be revisions, and a lot of people take a couple of like a little time for those revisions.
Mhm.
So I would yeah have that conversation with your mentor, and maybe your committee too, just to
Mhm.
let them know. Yeah, but I'm sad that that happened to you also.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we just deal with it and make the best of it. And look on the
We
bright.
do. We take lemons and make lemonade all the time. Yep, and then we take lemonade and make popsicles. So
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I mean, like, you can check things many times over, which I did, like, 3, 4 times. And then it still, got to the grad office and they said, no. And here I am in the middle of 9 dissertation credits, but that's okay. We'll deal with it.
yeah, Savannah, you think
Yeah.
it's about time?
Yeah, I think we're all right to go ahead and at least start letting our panelists introduce each other. Katie said she'd be here in a few minutes.
Okay.
But yeah, Latosha, Dom, would you like to start off by giving us like some background about like your academic career, what your dissertation was on, names, stuff like that. Well, I already said those, but yeah.
All right, I can go first. You can hear me, right? I've been having some audio problems. Okay, Latasha Raleigh. I'm a PhD, newly minted, urban education studies, and I completed in February 2024, so it's very new. However, I defended back in March of 2023 because I had lots of revisions to do, and so therefore I did have to register for coursework because you have to stay current. Even though it was just research and dissertation, I still had to do that. My background, I've been an administrator, an educator in education. And when I went into the program, I wanted to do something that would change the world, right? And so I was looking at parent engagement, caregiver engagement, community engagement. And while I was on my journey for this dissertation, I became a grandmother. And so then I started thinking about grandmothers who were primary caregivers for their grandchildren and how that impacts in the area of education. So my title was Black Grandmother Power, the Art and Wisdom of Caregiving and Leadership. My master's was in educational leadership. And so I was able to tie that in with my dissertation for urban education studies. And I was still able to look at family engagement, all the components, but just specifically, what is it that grandmothers do in educating the grandchildren, sharing their wisdom, being able to navigate a lot of things about life, from the spiritual, from the educational, from the social, emotional, all those components were parts that I were able to talk to other grandmothers about in my interviews, and was able to come up with some different findings. So that was kind of a little bit, I don't know if you need any more than that, but that's a start.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Hopefully we'll get to hear a little bit more about that. So Dominic, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself now?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dominic Ackery. Most people know me as Dom. I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at the National Institute of Health, specifically the National Institute on Aging in Bethesda, Maryland. My PhD was in medical neuroscience, where I studied in the lab of Dr. Jung-Soo Kim. Our lab very broadly was interested in neurodegeneration. And really early on in my PhD, I came in as a wet lab biologist at the bench doing experiments. And during my doctoral studies, I minored in bioinformatics, which was an option along with my PhD program, and really found a love for dry lab biology, doing computational work. And so when it came time to do my dissertation, I had a couple main projects that I had worked on and started from the wet lab side that didn't really pan out. And I really worked much more on the dry end as a computational biologist, collaborating with other people in our lab. And so it made it, I guess my biggest challenge with writing my dissertation was that I had all of these projects that were in the sphere of bioinformatics and Alzheimer's disease and neurodegeneration. But when it came to writing my own unique element, what I had was my own parts of different projects. What we were able to do was identify sort of one common theme that I was working on, which was the influence of genetic diversity within tauopathy, how different genetic backgrounds or everything that makes your genome unique to you, how that influences the ability of us to ask questions about a specific part of neurodegeneration called tauopathy and how we model that in animal models. Other than that, the other sort of background about myself that might be relevant to this was my background before coming into the PhD. I actually worked in a writing center. So that was very helpful when it came to my own dissertation writing. And so maybe if you guys have questions about how you can bring parts of your dissertation to a writing center and what might be useful as someone who has been on both sides of it, I might be able to answer. So thanks.
Yeah, that is so cool. Thanks for sharing, Dom. Like, for those of you who don't know, I also work in our writing center here. So always nice to see another writing center person. All right, and if I'm not mistaken, Katie's here now. Katie, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yes. Can you guys hear me okay? Sorry, my headphones aren't working. Okay. Yeah, so I am Katie Thibodeau. I just graduated in January with my master's in pharmacology, and from the Ariza Balaga lab in the Department of Pharmacology in the School of Medicine. And my thesis was on the a specific protein in the mitochondria of Toxoplasma gondii. So I was looking at the how the mitochondria morphology changes throughout its life cycle and depending on if it's intracellular or not, and how this specific protein, LMF1, affects it. And with that, I am now a medical technologist with Quest Diagnostics. So if you have any questions about going from an academic research into a clinical lab setting, I can definitely answer those questions and how to translate your research experience into a more general lab experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, that also sounds really cool. See. And so I think to start off, I have a couple like general questions for all of our panelists, and then we'll open it up to everyone who's here today to ask their own questions, if that sounds good with everyone. So just to start us off, since we're talking about writing theses and dissertations, maybe you could give us a little background on like your writing experience, like how comfortable you were with writing when you were going into the project, and then maybe a bit about your writing process in general, how you approach writing.
I can kick us off. I thought I was comfortable with writing because I enjoyed writing, story writing, and poetry and narrative. But then getting into the dissertation, it was a little bit different because it was more formal of a lot of the things that had to go into a dissertation. So my process required a lot of different formats. I did independent writing on my own from different feedback from my committee or I had a writing partner. And so that was my special place at Panera Bread in the back with my green tea and my headphones listening to jazz. So that was a piece for me, sort of self-care to do that independent writing. But I also had a sister group that we met once a week, and we actually read things out loud so that we could hear what's being said, and then they could give feedback like that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, so you need to revise that. So that was very important to have that group. And so I encourage anyone and everyone to get a group that you can write with. And I think one of the key things, I had a tutor. No shame in that game. I had a tutor. I did go to the writing center, but they encouraged me to look at someone who already had a PhD because they said there were more specific things that I needed to look at. And so I connected with a librarian that had a PhD. And so that was really helpful to meet with her. I usually met with her at least once a month, every other week. It depended on how many things that she gave me for feedback. And so for me, a challenge was my grammar. So I spent a lot of time on revisions. So it just took me a little longer, but everyone's on this journey at a different pace. So that's a little bit about my process.
Thank you. And yeah, I love what you said there, where like everyone's goes at their own pace with these things, no two are alike. Dom, do you want to give us a little bit of info about like your experience writing before the project and what your writing process is like in general?
Yeah, so I would say, it might be helpful for me to give a layout of what my dissertation looks like, because I know that also can look different for different people. When I started my dissertation and I looked for feedback from my committee and my program, they basically laid out two different types of dissertations that I could write that were specific to my program and allowed by the school and everything. And that was one that they called a more traditional dissertation, where each chapter would be like one chapter on an introduction, one on a methods, one on a results, etc., down like that. The other was one that's more like collation of the different papers that I had worked on. So there were, along my dissertation, a couple manuscripts that I had written on which I was first author. And so what my dissertation ended up looking like was the second option, where I had a long form introduction that read much more like a review paper. 3 chapters that were each manuscripts. One had been in the publication process, which was a requirement for my program, and 2 others that I basically structured to look like the second chapter, and then put in all my unpublished data like that, and then a 5th chapter that was a conclusion. I wanted to mimic what Latasha said about having writing partners. I think when it came to structuring my chapters and figuring out what my dissertation was going to look like, I had a lot of conversations with members in my lab about the way that my figures looked, the overall structure of the story that I wanted to tell. And I did very little actually writing with and around other people, but sort of presenting over and over again what the structure was going to look like was helpful for me. And then when it came to doing the physical writing, especially around that long form first chapter, I'm like a solo writer. I really need to get in the zone and put myself in writing mode. And once I was able to figure out what that looked like for me, which was really, finding isolated places where I can not have any distractions, that's when I did the bulk of my physical, going from the outline to what it looked like at the end.
Yeah, thank you. And that's really interesting. I didn't that like your program had like these specific sort of subgenres of dissertations before. Yeah, like it's so context dependent. Let's see. Katie, do you want to give us some information, about like your experience writing before and your writing process, things like that?
Mhm. Yeah, so my experience writing before, I had um, published a couple papers where I wasn't the first author, so I had a minor writing role in those, which was helpful to get into like the style. And then I've also written a couple grant applications, which also helped with that. When it came to actually writing my thesis, it really helped me to have previous students' thesis to read. So my PI gave me a couple of those, especially the one that was basically the project that came right before mine. It was really helpful to get all of those details because I was using a lot of the same cell lines. And so it was nice to have that kind of as a framework almost. And I ended up writing my thesis more like the traditional style that Dom talked about, which helped me break down in detail some. So really it is just like a personal preference thing for that. And then different to both Latasha and Dom, I can't do an isolated writing session. I just get distracted. I play on my phone. I, get up, walk away. So what I would do is I would sit at my bench in lab and watch everybody else do their experiments. And then I'd have music blaring in my ears, and then I could write. And so it really is just like very, however you can get it done, that's how you got to get it done because, everyone's like, oh, just, go to a cafe or something. I was like, that's not going to work for me. I need to see people like doing stuff.
Yeah, I love that. It's so easy to get distracted when you're sitting by yourself. I have to like co-write with a friend a lot. And I love that you brought up like looking at models, looking at other examples. I'm also writing my thesis right now. And like being able to go in and read what other people have done has been really helpful. I think IUPUI or IUI these days, I guess, on like our scholar works has like a lot of examples from like past students that might other people might find helpful to look at.
I looked at a lot of different institutions, scholar works, and looking at how they're structured. And I really liked IUIs because it's broken down by program. And it's really up to date compared to other programs. I mean, like Latasha, I also officially graduated in February, and mine went up like the beginning of March, which I think that's a really quick turnaround time. So you guys have a lot of options and a well categorized way to go and pick them.
Oh yeah, the last time I was on there, this searching was pretty intuitive, I thought.
I'll
See.
drop that in the chat. But I also want to mention in the chat, we had a student that asked about the writing group. So do you mind mentioning the writing group? And she specifically was interested in the hybrid session and if they can join that hybrid section.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the graduate office and the writing center, we collab over like things like this. Another activity we do is our writing and community groups. They're currently on Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays from 4 to 6, Tuesdays from 10 to 12. If you're in person, you can join us in the graduate commons on the 4th floor of the library. There is also a hybrid option, although I would have to dig up a link again because not many people have like wanted to use the hybrid option before, but you can join us over Zoom as well if you would like. We meet for a couple of hours. We talk about what we want to accomplish for that time. We do some like quiet writing. We take a break halfway through to like vent about what things are going wrong and then write for a little longer. It's a good space to just like have some set time to get some work done. The people who have joined us have found it really helpful. So you're always welcome to come.
And I dropped
And
that link in the chat. It's the longer link at the top, 5:18 p.m.
so we talked a little bit about like, all dissertations and theses being different from each other. But was there anything specific that made it different from writing, like any other scholarly works that you've done in the past for class or whatever, that you had to like sort of shift or reorient to approach it differently because of like, its size or what you were handling, things like that?
Well, for me, it was a different writing process for me. I had to constantly ask the questions, like a so what? Why in the world am I writing this? Or who will care? Or what difference will it make in the world? So that was a constant referring to the literature and also the interviews with the grandmothers and kind of tying those pieces together throughout because it had to flow. And that's where I ran into a lot of problems. That's why it took me a little bit longer because things were not connecting as smoothly. And so for me, just just questions throughout each section. And I had to chunk each section because you can't just do a whole big old dissertation in one sitting. So you start with your background and your research question, and then you go into that literature review, what connects with the writing. And then, the methods, what methods are you going to use for this study? And then for me, the challenge became chapters 4 and 5 because I had to analyze all that stuff. Once you gather all this information, then I had to analyze and come up with the themes and how did it connect with the literature? How did it connect with my theoretical frame? So that's when things got a little challenging. And then of course the discussion and the conclusion and implications. How will this be used, or what other study and research needs to happen? So there were lots of components, but you have to do it in small chunks, or at least I have to. I mean, because if you look at the whole big thing, it's overwhelming, to look at everything. So bits and pieces along the way.
Yeah, I love that. Like the, thinking of it as small pieces. I also really liked how you were like, well, what does it mean? What does it mean? Always going back to that question. That's super great. What about you, Dom?
Yeah, I mean, I know we said this a couple times that dissertations can be specific to disciplines and things like that. And I found that especially for writing the dissertation, the most helpful feedback that I got were from people who had graduated from my program. And one of the things that one of the best pieces of advice that I got that helped me finish was to first attack my data chapters that I had. And sort of writing them as manuscripts that I was already used to writing made it easier because I had already established sort of set of how I wanted to attack it, writing figures first and then methods and results before attacking sort of the interpretation aspect of it. What I found to be most challenging about the dissertation was the introduction, which was expected to be that sort of review style, and discussion, which was supposed to bring together those data chapters that sort of served as individual manuscripts. And even once I had the structure of them outlined and felt very confident about that, it was actually putting words on the page and putting citations of things that I had read together that I found most challenging. I know this might not work for everyone, but I sort of had this idea in my head of how long each of the bullet points that I had in my outline were going to be. I knew that I wanted to write 1,000 words about, this aspect of Alzheimer's disease. And once I sort of had that expectation for myself, it was really just getting into the practice of writing. And I really found that, like any muscle, once you build it up and have practice with it, you really get on a roll. So the best way to write a lot, if that's your goal or something that you have to do during your dissertation, is by, practicing, flexing that muscle, making it a regularly planned thing that you're going to do, and not putting the expectation on yourself that a month before you're going to defend, you're going to have it all magically done. Like, you need to, or at least I needed to put expectations on myself that I have to learn what it means to write 1,000 words in a day. And once I did that, then writing 1,000 words a day wasn't so bad. Then I could write 2,000 words a day. And, then things could ramp up that way. And that's what worked for me. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Like, these things take practice. You have to work at it just like any skill, like being consistent and learning how fast you can write and how, like, what your sort of work pace is. I like that. What about you, Katie?
Yeah, so my biggest I guess issue when writing my thesis was um a lot oftentimes in like scientific writing or like papers, you have to condense what you did and like say, like a something that took you like a month to do is like now 2 sentences. But then when you go into the thesis, you have to expand those 2 sentences again and give all those details. So I'd gotten so used to writing concisely and like with as little words as possible. Then all of a sudden they're like, no, tell me everything you've ever done. And so it was really hard to switch my frame of mind within that. And I already don't write like very wordy. So it was definitely a struggle to get those words in. My PI was constantly being like, add in another sentence, add in a sentence. And I was like, but what do I have nothing to say. But so just like finding those details that you can elaborate on is really important, and making sure that you're as clear as you can be. And against most advice, don't be as concise.
Yeah, the shift in like genres and expectations from like other previous work can be a big one. Yeah, and so can, like you said, what else do I say? Figuring out what else you can say. All right, so I think we'll
Well, real,
probably, oh,
real
go ahead.
quickly, for me, it was the opposite because mine was too long and wordy. Mine was a lot of narrative and a lot of story. I wanted to say everything that the grandmother said, and I had to cut mine down. When I got to the end, I had to take out about 70 pages of writing to get it within the frame of where it needed to be. So it took me a while to revise and condense it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Overwriting can be just as challenging to combat as like being used to underwriting. Yeah. Gosh, that's so many that's so many pages, poor pages. Oh, right. Right. I think we'll do one more from me, and then I want to open it up to everyone else if they have any questions specifically. So before that, are there any specific resources or like sources of like mentorship that you really leaned on or found very helpful during the process? Latasha, I saw that you posted some links to books down there already. But if you have any others to share, maybe you can start us off.
Yeah, I always refer to the two that I put in there because they're not, you don't have to read them cover to cover. It's just like if you're in a certain section and you need to look at some things and get some ideas. And they were written a long while ago, but they still had great information for dissertation. So that was very helpful for me. And I also kept a ongoing, I guess, field notebook. Um, and I had, this is my field notebook. And so in that, as I did research, as I jotted down thinking and reflection and things that tied with the theoretical frame, just all of that kinds of stuff throughout the study was very helpful for me. And when I met with my committee, if they gave me some feedback, I made sure I put it in my notebook so that I can refer back to it because they're going to send it back if it didn't answer the questions that they gave me. So that was very helpful. And I did have a mentor outside of my committee, which was really good because if you may need to complain about your committee, or just have conversation about some things that they've told you and you want more clarification, I could go to her and have no judgment, but just conversation. And so she had a PhD and she'd been a PhD for a long time, and it was very beneficial to just have those conversations. So that was a really good resource. And so if you can set that up, I think that's a good thing. Now, you can't go against your chair, of course. You have to do what your chair says, but you may have better understanding as you talk with someone else about what was asked of you.
Yeah, I like the field notebook idea. That sounds really useful, and making sure that you're like keeping track of and addressing any feedback you get, and the seeking other avenues of like support and mentorship that are not all real tight in your current bubble. That sounds really great. What about you, Dom?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it brief because the two things that helped me write my dissertation was one thing that Latasha just said and one thing that Kat said earlier. That unofficial mentors can be great, not just as a way to vent or sort of center yourself, but also to hold yourself accountable. I had unofficial mentors outside of my committee that ranged from faculty members to other graduate students, and really even junior graduate students who were there to talk to me along the way and helping me stay accountable was a big part of my writing process. And going back to what Kat said earlier about the best dissertations is a done one. That's me paraphrasing my own way, keeping in mind that you have to finish. And that was something that stuck with me when Kat said it earlier. The enemy of done is perfect, and the best dissertation is a finished one. So keeping those things in mind as I was writing, along with the accountability, helped me finish.
Yeah, that's great. The best dissertation is a done dissertation. Like it is. It really is. Uh, and I liked that you specified that, support and mentorship doesn't necessarily have to be from like other faculty members. Like, it can also be members of your cohort, things like that. What about you, Katie?
Yeah, so the most of the resources that I would keep on hand were those other theses that I mentioned earlier. And then I also would keep open the paper that really started the research area I was in to just like see where it started. And I don't know, it kept a frame of mind for me that it's adding on to this research, and that helped me stay focused and keep the research connected to the greater understanding of the toxoplasma, and like show myself that it's not just one little thing that I'm doing, but it actually has a greater impact for the field itself. Yeah. And then I also would talk to my lab members and friends and, complain or whatever about writing, but
Yeah, everyone needs a little vent session, a little complaining once in a while. And I really liked the point that you made about keeping in mind the work that you're building off of or expanding. I think that sounds like a great idea, like knowing where you're coming from kind of thing. All right, well, I have a couple more questions, but I want to first open it up to the rest of you who came here today. Does anyone have any specific questions that they would like to ask our lovely panelists?
Hi, my name's Jennifer Hippie, and I apologize. I'm kind of sick, so if I start coughing, I apologize. But Dr. Rowley, I don't know if you remember me. I had a class with you back in 2020. We were partners on a project with Tayan Swafford. So
Wow. Well,
so
good to connect again.
yeah, so congratulations. You've given me hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm at the point where I'm done with my coursework, and I have turned in my first draft of for my basically an outline of my dissertation. And I've gotten feedback on essentially I really just need to narrow. I kind of just threw everything at the board that I was interested in. And so I guess what I'm looking for is information on how to kind of narrow down just on one piece of the bigger puzzle that I want to look at. So any information on how you chose like that one little area to focus in on with the knowledge that there's other pieces, but again, that done dissertation is kind of what I'm going for.
That's a super great question. Latasha, would you like to
Well,
start
I
off
missed
answering
the
that? Yeah.
question. I missed
Oh
the
no.
question because my sound went out and I came back in. What exactly was the question?
No, I believe Jennifer was asking for advice on like she's submitted like an outline for a dissertation and needs to like narrow it further. So like how did you go about narrowing your topic, deciding like, well, there's lots of interesting things I could look at, but I have to get it done. So this is specifically what I'm gonna zero in on. Like how did you go about figuring that out? Is
Well,
that
for
about
me,
yeah.
yeah, is that good? For me, during the literature review time, I kept a matrix of articles of what was happening in the field and trying to see what was most important for me to focus on. And so that helped me stay focused. Once I came up with my research question, because I knew I had to answer that question. That's the whole purpose of doing this, right? And so the articles that connected with trying to get at an answer, I kept those in my matrix. And then as I listened to the interviews and what they said, you have to, well, that's in later on. But before, when you get to the, you said finishing the coursework and doing your qual papers, right? I actually talked to my professors, and I actually had an opportunity to kind of formulate the questions that they were going to kind of ask me in the qual process, because I had my methods professor, I had my overall urban education professor, and then I had I think it was what was the other one? My minor, which was educational leadership. And so I kind of tossed questions around with the professors who were going to give me that oral exam and that I had to write to. And they helped me, in a sense, narrow some things down on the questions I asked, the questions they asked, and that helped a whole lot for the qualifying exam for me.
Yeah, Jennifer, I found myself in a very similar situation to you. Not after turning in a draft to my committee, but right before I was started actually writing my whole dissertation. Um, I had a committee meeting where I asked, like, does this go in? Does this go in? What exactly am I going to write about? And this is where I was really glad to have an external member, because the internal members of my committee were all people who I collaborated on the papers that I had written and were still writing. And they gave scientific feedback where they said, oh, well, you could do this, you can do that. And my external member just kind of interrupted and said, this is your dissertation. You get to decide what goes in. There will be other times in your career where you can talk about the science, things that you want to put in and write your papers and things like that. But you need to decide what it is that you want to put in, and we'll give you feedback as you write that dissertation. And it was jarring at that moment, because it really didn't answer my question about whether or not my one experiment went in or not. But like, reflecting back on it, it was a moment that really helped me kind of contextualize the fact that the dissertation was going to be something that I'm going to take ownership on and going to decide how to go forward. And it kind of gave me the initiative to pick that one thing. So it wasn't something that I looked towards other people or certain resources to sort of, zero in on, but just kind of realizing that I had to take something and run with it. So.
Those are great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Katie, did you have anything to add to this specific question before we?
No, not really.
Okay, yeah.
Mine is pretty straightforward.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes it works like that. Yeah, thank you. But thank you both. Those were really good answers. Does anyone else have any specific questions that were like bugging?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Abdul, PhD bioinformatics. So my question is to Dom. So I'm in like kind of similar situation where my papers, they become kind of like a chapter in my dissertation. Introduction introduces kind of everything together. So how did you brought everything together in your discussion and conclusion section? Because, in each paper you have kind of like different theme to it, but they connect, but not really. So how did you tackle it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and nice to meet you. Yeah, I think for bioinformaticians, which I call myself now because I work in a neurogenetics lab, and I'm the bioinformatician here, kind of in that same space that I was in my PhD. I think it's tough for us when the expectations are this, I'm going to call old-fashioned format of a dissertation, where you have like your own one question and you go all the way through it. I know that it's old-fashioned isn't the right word, because there are still different disciplines that function this way. But for bioinformatics, it was how we did at one point in time, and now we kind of work more collaboratively, in a sense that we work on small parts of the project. So with that in mind, that bioinformatics did work that way at one point in time, and now didn't anymore, I made my introduction like a history of my specific part of bioinformatics. Went through, how these things were developed, less about what I would go into directly in my chapters, but like, why were these questions that had to be answered? And so with that in mind, the ending of my first chapter sort of hints at the direction that I was going into. And then by the time that you're in the discussion, the final chapter part of it, it was a lot easier for me to write. So I would say, with those things in mind, if you are going to have an intro and a concluding remarks chapter, I'd say tackle that introduction to figure out what kind of themes and how you're going to frame it. And then, that final one might seem a little bit easier by the time you're thinking on that 10,000-foot level above the everyday project level that you might be used to writing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I think it's super interesting that there's different structures for those kind of things in different fields. Let's see. Do we have any other questions from anyone who wants to jump in? Mhm. Okay, well, see, if not, I have some more. So,
I actually had something that I want to
oh,
talk about because I
yeah.
know it's
Uh-huh.
a hot topic that a lot of people are talking about right now, and it's AI. So, artificial intelligence. Um, People who know me know that I'm extremely skeptical about the use of AI. Um, Basically, because whether it's in coding or in writing, it's my opinion that I don't think it's that good. And I've listened to and gone to a couple of talks by editors of scientific journals that talk about AI. And the main feedback that I hear from everyone is that, generative AI just is not at a level right now where it can write in a way that one keeps people safe from plagiarizing, and two, in a way, and this is what's even more important from my perspective, in a way that doesn't what they call hallucinate, make things up, make up citations. And so while generative AI is not in a place that helps all scientific writers or dissertation writers, um, there are AI tools that can be helpful along with your scientific writing. My lab pays for a subscription to a scientific AI editing service. I think they rebranded recently. I don't know what they're called now. It's not super important, but if you do have access to AI-driven editing services, sometimes they still need a human eye, but they were very helpful for me to catch some of those things that Latasha was talking about earlier, some of those like syntax issues and things that, your dissertation gets so big that spell check in Word doesn't cut it anymore. Like it'll just give up at some point in time and it'll start missing things. So anyway, if you're thinking about AI, my tips are stay away from generative AI and maybe look at some of those copy editing ones because they were helpful for me.
Yeah, that's I mean, I know that's a really, like you said, a really hot button topic nowadays. Mm. I know I've used not generative AI, but like Grammarly has been helpful for me sometimes just to, sometimes I know what I'm supposed to write, but I'm typing so fast that I miss something and don't realize it. So things like little programs like that can be helpful.
Yeah, the one I think it was or is called Curie now, like Madame Curie, and that's the one. But anyway, you put in a Word doc, and what you get out of it is sort of like what you would get from a collaborator. You would get back like a track edits document that had comments and stuff like that you could accept or decline. Again, it's not perfect. There were things that like it was trying to fix that needed to stay in there. So you always have to be the one to make the decision. But just wanted to put that out there if it's not on people's radar that it could be helpful.
So then I also want to really quickly mention formatting. It has very specific format that you need to follow. And we don't want anyone to get to a point where they have done everything, but because of the format is a delay. So I definitely suggest that you use the template that we have online. And I'm gonna put a link in the chat that also shares a little bit about formatting deadlines. And now we've got a new question that has come in. So do take into consideration the format, and I will go ahead and write in that format. So don't wait till the end and then try and put it in the format.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Hardy. I know the recorders can be kind of touchy about the formatting stuff. All right, let's see. We have a question from T here. I hope I'm saying your name right. Apologies if I am not. So I'll go ahead and read that out. Let's see. I have a general question regarding literature management. I've been experiencing some difficulties remembering and processing all the data I've collected. I was wondering if any of you could share how you managed to handle and organize the vast amount of information for your own projects. Any tips or strategies would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Yeah, that's a really great question, managing everything that you have to gather for a thesis or dissertation. Latasha, do you want to start us out with that one?
Well, I wasn't as organized as I needed to be, so that was a problem. But I did have different files that I managed to keep things in on the computer. But I also had my field note. I did the citation management. Yep, that's key. So I went to the training for that so I could learn how to do that. Didn't keep up on it like I needed to. So I found myself kind of restarting. That's probably why it took me a long time to get through. Because then I was like, I know I had that article and I know that I recorded that. Yes, citation management is very helpful because it keeps it in order. So when you have to do that reference page at the end, then you have all of the things and it's ready. It's ready to go. So I didn't do as good as I needed to, but I made it through.
Yeah, reference manager is key. There are a lot of free reference managers that you can try, like open source ones. Some are run by the same places that publish, like by publishers, so they could be really easy to have plugins. However, I find that when you're choosing a reference manager and you're getting used to it, that's like the biggest barrier to using it. But being at IUI, you have access to an EndNote subscription. Use that resource. I mean, it's going to be a high barrier, again, to learn how to use and learn how to work with, but it is so worth it, especially when you get to a point and, like this is not for the dissertation, but a small story. I was writing a manuscript, the first one I'd ever written, and I had put in my citations by hand. And when I had given it to I know, right? I see Dr. Hardy. When I had gotten it back from my PI, he said, change this from the number format to first author's last name at all. And I said, oh, well, that's going to take me, a couple of days to do. And he was like, a couple of days, just hit a button. And I was like, I didn't know about reference managers then, and realized that to switch formats it should have taken me a second. So when it comes to stuff like that, and when it comes to tracking the citations you have and putting things in folders, learning EndNote can be very, very helpful, especially since you have a subscription through IUI. So use it.
And I put the LibGuides in there for EndNote and for Zotero. The LibGuides will help you guide you through each of those citation management resources. And I'm also going to put in the chat IUware. Remember, you have a lot of software that is free to you through IU. So check that out.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hardy, for sharing those. And thank you, Latasha and Dominic, for sharing that. Yeah, I haven't used EndNote, but I did start using Zotero when I started on my dissertation. And it's been really great, especially like it doesn't work on my Safari browser, but on like Firefox or Chrome, you can have like a plugin and then I can just push a button and then it just saves it to my folder when I'm looking at articles. So I don't have to have 20 tabs open until I'm done with the project. It's so nice.
One of the because for years I had used Mendeley, which was like Zotero, it was free, and I liked the idea that like I wouldn't lose the information if I went to an institution where I didn't have a subscription or left academia. But then in like 2021, Mendeley dropped the ability to use it on like tablets and phones, and so I had this like great structure that I didn't have access to anymore in the way that I had been using it. So I had to make the switch and decided to make the change to EndNote. But Zotero is also a very popular one, and I think that you just got to choose the one that's right for you.
I had another suggestion for arranging citations and stuff. I mean, yeah, you definitely want to use a citation manager, but if you're wanting to have these different papers open or articles open all at the same time, but you don't want to have like, I don't know, like 50 tabs or something, and you're like clicking through each one trying to find it. Now, at least on Chrome, but I think on the other ones as well, you can make tab groups. And so you basically combine them all and you can like label them, whatever. And that was really helpful to me because I had one that was like, toxo, layout and like toxo, mitochondria and like so had all of these papers, but I didn't have a million tabs anymore, and I knew where each of them were. And so that really helped me when I needed them open, but I didn't want to like search through them all the time. And then also I think an outline for your thesis is essential because if you don't have that, it's really hard to think how you're going to write things. So even if you have all the citations, you're still like, okay, I need to write about this. And then you like start jumping around. But if you have that outline, it really helps you focus in on different areas.
That's when I was writing my undergraduate thesis, I used the outlines a lot and my dissertation both. And even though they were different levels, like the skills from doing it in my undergrad thesis helped me in my PhD. I think if I were to use the writing center, I would do something that I did for my undergraduate thesis, which was when I had one of those bullet points in my outline or a group of bullet points that I wanted to work on, I would, book a session and bring my draft of just that outline to the writing center and say, look, this is like how it fits into this chapter or this section, but I'm struggling with XYZ, this one sentence, this one thing. And whether it's a friend that you're working with and giving you feedback or the writing center, I think that's a way that you might be able to get around the writer's block using an outline.
Yeah, thank you both. Yeah, outlines are like super helpful, and we are coming up at the end of our time, but I do want to circle back to the writing center, like Dom mentioned. It's not just for undergrads. We have lots of graduate students who come into the center. I'm also one of the consultants there. You can schedule hour-long blocks. You can also schedule like 2 sessions in a row, so you can have a good 2-hour chunk if you wanted to bring in something longer. And yeah, we can help with brainstorming, with, citation questions, with like making sure, your ideas are coming across clearly. So I hope if y'all are having like any issues, you know that that's a place you can go for help. And we are almost at the end of our time. So before we wrap up, any final quick words of advice to everyone before we say goodbye?
Well, one quick word of advice is to make sure you do have self-care along the way, because a lot of times you get so bogged down, you forget to take care of yourself, and it's hard to make it through the process if you are not at your best. So self-care.
I would say, even if it's someone that my last piece of advice is, even if it's not someone who's actually going to be looking at your writing, find a accountability buddy, whether that's someone also writing their PhD or their dissertation or their master's thesis, or someone who has done it before, and tell them that you're going to write. Tell them you're going to write 1,000 words this week or today, and if they check in on you, they'll help you get along the way and help you move forward.
As someone who likes to procrastinate, the only way to finish it is to start it. So just like, if you can just start one sentence and then suddenly the next sentence is so much easier. So really just, you got to start.
Yeah, well, thank you both, and thank you all for coming. Yeah, I hope everyone found this really helpful. Just echoing again, feel free to drop by our writing group, feel free to, visit the writing center. I hope everyone has a good rest of their day. Can we get like a, I don't know, Zoom applause for our panelists? There we go. Yeah, I see that little emoji. Thank you.
Alrighty, well, thanks everyone.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you.